No, it's just nice. No. It's not fair. Yes. Places the ask one.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Service Area Town Hall, January 28th, 2025. We have a few on the line as well, and welcome to those. I know we're presenting this. If you cannot hear us or have any questions, please use that chat function on the on Teams, so we can take care of those. Just to go through what we're going to be our agenda tonight. First, I'm going to thank you for coming to this. We haven't had a town hall like this, I know, in a long time. So a little bit of what we are going to be going through tonight. I'm going to start with about 20 minutes or so of a presentation. And within the purpose of the presentation is kind of do an orientation to the service areas. Go over what is the service area responsible for. Do a little discussion in our operating and reserve funds of each service area and how those attribute to our dues service areas. And a little discussion about service area committees. I know we have some associated or some service areas that have committees and some that do not. And then we're going to go into our proposed process plan. Thanks for filling out those comment cards. Those comment cards we're going to be reviewing after discussing and answering some of those questions here in the room. And then we're going to have time after that, we can open mic for speak. So do that. Before I begin to get into it, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jacob Waddle, the general manager here with the town. I've been with with the Celebration Town Hall for about 5 months now, but I've been a part of Celebration, our homeowners association, just inside Hardison Park for the greater part of 5 years, or going on 6 years. And on the line, we do have Charles Richard, who is your service area liaison. Charles, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, 1 second, Charles. Let me just get the volume up. Yeah, I know. Charles is going to say a couple words, but I could just barely hear him. 1 moment, Charles.
Yep.
Here. Hey, Charles.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, Charles.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hear you perfectly.
Okay, you hear me?
Do a little introduction of your.
Sure. Just want to double check. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it was a little bit quiet. Okay, perfect. Sorry, it's live television, folks. So I'm Charles. I'm the service area liaison. I sit on the board of directors. I'm in my second year, and I want to spend just a couple of seconds, maybe a minute or two at the most, just kind of talking through why we're all here today. And where I want to start is just rewinding the clock a little bit to, I think it was October when Celia unfortunately left the board, and there was a vacancy in the service area liaison role. And that was a role that I volunteered for because I knew there were some opportunities there, just in discussions, just on the side with some residents. I knew there were some things that, you know, maybe we're not doing great, maybe some areas where we can improve. And so I thought that was really something that I wanted to drive and see kind of what's going on and see what's under the hood. So the first few months were really a period of learning and seeing what's going on and talking with residents. I was out in Academy Row and Parkview and a few other service areas. And I've been talking with many residents and committees over the last few months. And I think the one thing that I've heard pretty consistently is we really need to get in front of a few things and get some things remedied fairly quickly. There's some inconsistency in processes and projects and landscaping, and we're doing some things well for sure, but there are definitely some areas of improvement. And this is certainly something that I brought to the board's attention and thought, let's get folks in a room, let's get the residents together to talk about this, and let's also task our management team with coming up a way of working better on this. So that's why we're all here today, to ideate and come up with ways to really improve the process for residents. And so, what happened in the past, obviously, is in the past at this point. We're really trying to work together collectively to make sure that we deliver value for residents and that we're really trying to find better ways of doing things, because we've heard you loud and clear. We need to improve. And the goal of this is to really come together, work together, find solutions. And again, that's kind of why we're all here today. So Jacob, I'm going to turn it over to you and Lauren, and I'm going to go on mute. And I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for jumping on the call too. I know you wanted to be here in person, and things came up that took you out of town. So I appreciate you still jumping online for this. To introduce the rest of the people we have here in the room, actually up front is Elise, that is our service area administrator. We have Rose, our service area manager, and we have Lauren, the executive director of town hall as well. So as most of you are probably aware, each service area was established with their own supplemental celebration community charter. These charters have individual budgets associated to them. And we have a total of 14 different service areas that are managed by our team. Academy Row, Blue Stage, East Village Duplexes, Golden Aster, Green Lawn, Island Village, North Village, also known as Charleston Place, Oak Pond, Parkview Townhomes, Roseville, Savannah Square, South Village Townhomes, Spring Lake Gardens, and Spring Lake Townhomes. Totaling 613 doors. So these each kind of resemble a smaller homeowners association under the larger celebration. Typically, if what you'd see this in a standard HOA process, if these are what would be considered a portfolio account. So they typically would have one person like that handles the portfolio of 8 to 10 or so different homeowner associations, and visit them once a month, once a quarter, and then remote for most of them. So it's a bit special that we have here in celebration some staff that is on site inside of our community to help address these and be on site and visit the properties on a frequent basis as well. Just a couple frequently asked questions on this. So what is covered under our HOA service area fees? We have your landscaping maintenance, your irrigation operations, exterior cleaning, roofing, painting, exterior caulking, and exterior termite pest control. What type of insurance should homeowners have? And that's an HO3 policy. These are the questions that we are often receiving, so we want to kind of address these. Some of this might be information for deeper parts of this later on. And does the master policy cover the roof of my town? So on common areas and amenities, not the homeowner townhome roof, contact our style insurance group. That's the umbrella insurance policy that we have for celebration. Annual services provided. So there's I think you got 4 items lined up here of kind of the major things that you're going to see on an annual basis that comes out of your HOA dues on operation. One of the main things right here to start off is our pressure washing. Twice a year, so in the springtime, typically April through June, you're going to do power washing of what we call the flats. That includes the front porches, front walkways, sidewalks, curbs, real walkways leading up to the yards, driveways, and outside patio fences. In the fall season, around August, September, this is when we do a full power washing, including the full exterior of the townhome, duplex, triplex. And between these cycles, power washing can be done by the homeowner as well. We typically try to work on buying power. This is one of the few items where we can implement some buying power by looping all 14 of the of the associations together. The contract or getting one contractor out here to try to get a better rate for each of the individual service areas, not doing 14 separate smaller. That's the thing that we thought that is helpful. Gutter cleaning, another one that we use the buying power, connecting all the HOA together with one vendor for these. This is performed usually once a year, includes removal of any large organic debris from the gutters to ensure the downspout properly functioning. The crew removes the debris by hand and any leftover debris with the blower. Typically, in special circumstances, no water use during these gutter cleanings. And then pest control, this is the treatment inside the maintenance contract for the landscaping. Additionally, you're going to see in the budgets, usually every other year as well. We get questions on why we see it some years in the operating budget, not others. Is every 2 year you have the service area term. We have our landscape monthly maintenance. So I know a lot of here about questions and different things regarding our landscaping in front or around your townhome. So in the monthly contract, these monthly contracts are individual to each service area. Some have different vendors, and that can be up to the community or the service area or the service area committee to help make those decisions on which service provider that they have. The monthly contract, think of that as if you had a single family house and you wanted someone to come mow your lawn, and you're paying them a flat rate. Now, if they're going to come and change out maybe annuals or put mulch in your bed, sometimes those things are often not inside this monthly contract. And inside the total service area budget, there's often a small amount allocated for landscaping, not in contract. So what's inside the contract is what we call our monthly maintenance. This thing includes trimming the grass, weeding, edging, trimming shrubs, and application of pesticide. Items that are not included in that monthly contract and that can either be included through the operating fund landscape non-maintenance category or through the reserve fund based on the reserve funding plan are the landscape improvements / refurbishments. This is anything regarding replacements or large work to trees, shrubs, ground cover, maybe a side. When we have hurricane or storm cleanup, there's often additional billing associated with that to the crews coming in to help clean up the storm. We have arbor and tree work. That's anything large tree canopies that are turning back on that. Mulch, there are, I think, a couple of the mulches inside that contract, but mostly mulch is a separate addition. Irrigation repairs, and that's kind of the main area that we will see not inside that contract. Why it's important that we want to list this out is these are the types of items when they're not inside that monthly contract, and we're talking about maybe you have a dead bush, it gets ripped out and stays a whole landscaping. is because that goes to that larger scale. Does that become reserve expenditure? Do we, and if we're going to do a reserve expenditure on one property for landscaping, typically it's reviewed for the whole service area location. Are we missing a bush maybe at 3 or 4 or 25 properties? And then doing that as one installation. Trying not to typically look at situations regarding landscaping at one door, but if we address it by one door, we have to address it for every door in that service area of the service area funds. Some major projects on an annual basis. These are projects that your service area team, project management takes a lot of their back office time for, and working with the different vendors and our larger town hall team to support some of these initiatives. These are going to be mainly your roofing and your painting projects of the townhouses. These projects are typically scheduled or based on the reserve set. These include doing a request for proposals, RFP, vendors, then selecting those vendors. And if there's a committee for those service areas, bringing those selections of vendors to the committees, letting them review them before taking the final candidate, and then passing those up to the board for final approval for signing on those contracts. We say the board is the CROA board, and then doing the work inspection. Our reserve studies, we talked about this. The reserve studies are established by a professional completed reserve study company. And we revise these every 3 years. So just at the tail end of last year, right in our budget season, we received new reserve studies for each of the 14 different service areas, as well as for CROA as a master association. These reserve studies often take into account in service area a smaller amount of items, but this is typically if you have any fences, this is going to be your irrigation systems, railings, often the roofs, and the paint projects. Those are the main roofs and paint projects are the main bread and butter of your reserves. There's also on the reserve study, usually a small allotment, I say small as a relatively number, allotment for landscape refurbishment as well. So when we talk about maybe putting in or ripping out some landscaping in your service area, and we certainly, our service areas range from very small, just a few homes, all the way up to 113 in some service areas. So doing one plant per door can often be a multi-$1,000 project. Where do the funds come from that for those types of projects? Those come out of your service area reserve fund. Every year, you often in your main budget, the main driver of your budget, where most of the funds are going, is into your reserve fund to be pulled out for these large capital sums. And on this, the reserve study gives us an expenditure as well as a funding plan. Our expenditure plan for each of the service areas goes 30 years into the future. So it's saying, your paint cycle is going to be every 7 years, and it's going to have those marks with a 2.7% inflation rate as well. So then you might see for 2025 at $100,000, might then, and then 2032 be, it'll have that inflation on that as well. We get these redone every 3 years to keep an alignment on them and to help us in those forecasting numbers. When we talk about the reserve funding plan, it's part of the reserve study. We get the funding plan with the expenditures together. Again, we use a nationally recognized company. They use a large amount of homeowners association called Reserve Advisors. So they come out with a team. They were out, I think, in August of last year on each and every one of your service area properties, walking around it. We're looking at, does the last funding plan that was done 3 years ago, is it accurate? Do things need updated? Are the prices accurate based on how the market has inflated or pricing of given parts? And that way, when they write a new fund, often we're going to see a lot of similarities. The goal is we see almost an exact similarity from the years. Since 2020, we started to see some big shuffles in the reserve funds, a lot, especially when it came to the funding application. So this one I wanted to pull up here. This is a snippet from one of our service areas. So You're going to see a few numbers there, 2025 to 2028. It goes 30 years out. It's going to show the reserve balance at the start of the year, the recommended total contribution per year. That's a very interesting line. We bring this up a lot during our budget discussions with the service area communities as well. Because you're going to see that number typically almost always increasing year after year. That's, like I said, based off an anticipated interest rate of 2.7% to represent. So if you look at this service area, the 2025 recommended contribution was 187,000. 2026, 190,000, 187,000. In a 2-year time span, that's about $14,000 increase to your reserve contributions. Where does the $14,000 come from? That is typically the main driver if you see your dues increase for your service area. It's not going into your operating, it's not going into often payroll or anything. It's going often straight into your reserve fund to be used for your large projects inside your service. At the very bottom of that, you're going to see anticipated reserve at end of year. That's a really important number when you look at the budgeting to see that. So look at the end of 2025, do we have what was expected in the plan of 187,000? Or in this year, do we have a lot of unexpected things that we had pulled from the reserve? Do we have some sidewalk work that caused issue with the drains and we had to do a lot of tree removal or anything that those projects were funded from the reserve that ended up pulling our reserves in advance to the funding? If that's the case, often there's a few options that we review with the service area committees or with the board as well. And that's going to be, do we adjust some of the expenditures in future years? Typically, what that would look like is if next year they have $10,000 for landscape repairs or enhancements, maybe we pull that funding, or do we put the $10,000 out an additional to the reserve contribution? That usually does mean an increase to dues, so that is often heavily way before making any of those types of decisions or raising those to the board during the budgets. All service areas except for Spring Lake Gardens have a reserve fund. Spring Lake Gardens is single family homes and the Spring Lake neighborhood. There's basically a master landscaping contract. So since they do not have any roof or paint projects, they don't have a reserve fund. There's mainly just an operating, just to cover the cutting grass and trimming bushes. I'm going to pause here before continuing on. Does anyone have any comments or questions related just to the reserve funding plan or the reserve expenditures? Yeah.
When one of your contractors messes up, who's at fault? Do you have a reserve fund for that, or does that get rolled back into your budget that you charge us?
It depends on the situation. Often, do you have anything in particular?
My house was painted a different color, which I was fine with. But unfortunately, I have a townhome and the person next to me is supposed to be compliant. I don't know how, because next to me are renters. And they repainted it without even asking about it. So we had to pay, we had to pay the painter twice to paint the same home. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with the wrong color per se. So that means, I have a feeling that my HOA will go up to make up for that difference.
For that one.
You paid labor twice.
I can speak to that. They were not paid twice for that. They came back and redid the painting within existing.
But did the left hand not talk to the right hand and ahead of time, say, this unit gets this palette, this unit gets this palette, this unit gets this palette? Was that not discussed prior to?
They were provided with the paint. They were provided with the paint palettes for each of the townhomes ahead of the project, which is why they had to repaint it under their own expense.
Yeah, typically we try to work in the best interest of the association and the service area without occurring.
But I, as a homeowner, have no problem with the new color.
Gotcha. That did not incur any cost. Thank you for that question. Do we have any other questions about reserve size?
Did the same company that did this reserve in August, is it the same company that had done it previously the other 3 years?
3 years ago, reserve advisors did the reserve studies for, yes. Thank you. Great question.
So you mentioned that Spring Lake Gardens doesn't have a reserve fund. And earlier you said that things like dead bushes and stuff would come out of the reserve fund. So how does that sort of thing happen in Spring Lake Gardens?
Spring Lake Gardens, a bit of a different case. That's typically can then come out of their landscaping contract from their operating. If the case that happened, something unprecedented happened, that would pull all of that. And that would be something that would typically be in the service area. The only option, if there's no funding available, would be a special assessment. That's typically an option that we never try to go to. It's not in favor for anyone really, but that would be the option to pay for that. Because those funds are typically only available for that service.
But who manages that process? Is it CCDD or is it somebody else?
No, that would be the service as far as the landscape.
Yeah. Here's an example, yeah.
So that would stay inside your service area here, for a landscaping issue like that. For capital assessments associated with the service area are also inside of, that would be a vote from the Pro Board based on, the community service areas, feedback and management feedback.
Okay, is there a distinction between the responsibility for Crow and CCD for landscaping
Yes,
in the Spring Lake Gardens area? It's very confusing, and I was confused by your earlier slides that alluded to a lot of scope that was covered, that isn't unilaterally covered among all of the communities. And so is there, for the sake of transparency, is there a document that you have that defines the scope of services that are responsible for the umbrella under which each of those services lie between PROA and CCDD? So to his question and mine, we can understand who we bring that concern to.
yes, that's going to be outlined in the chart of responsibilities, which is a document that's supposed to help with, the information provided inside the chart. CCTV, if it's CCTV land, it's going to be a CCTV. If it's part of your service area or PRO's land, then it's going to be a PRO related.
But is there a document, like a spreadsheet that defines that scope of service in the community? Because it's a little difficult in the chart to discern.
When specifically referencing CDD versus celebrate, PRO and service areas, there's not one specific document as there's so much landline between a lot of them. That's something, if you have any direct questions, shoot those over to us, we'll be do our best.
I was wondering where our money is, are we getting any rate of return, any interest?
Thank you. So the question that we had was, where is the money kept? And are you getting any rates of returns? So all of the accounts are kept with which bank? CIT Bank right now. Those are available. A lot of your financial documents are going to be available through CIRNet, direct access to you at any time. Depending on some of our some of the service areas do keep some of their funds in different investment options. Those are typically how that process happens. Those service areas have committees. The committees advise our financial manager to put those funds inside those investments. Those types of decisions then up to the PRO board for approval on vote. Once those are done, then the finance manager moves those funds from your account into those financial.
And even if your association does not have an investment account, you are earning some level of interest in your CIT bank accounts as well.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, so notice in the landscaping situation, sometimes the mulch and other items are not included. I mean, I've been over 6 years. I've been on HOAs before. If it's not, and it's coming out of our reserve, is there any 3 quotes for anything being done? I think we've had some stuff done recently that just got given to Brian. Without any other quotes. One was done wrong incorrectly the first time. We didn't know it until he came out. It said it's done wrong, and that's when I pointed out to Rose that nobody inspects anything. And then we hear about coming out every 3 months to check stuff. That's kind of late. Everything's getting kind of crappy. We don't live in some back road somewhere. We pay you guys to take care of this. So is there a process to get bids when it's coming out of the reserve on items like that. When I came 3 years ago, mulch twice a year, the palm trees on the property every other year, that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, the last time I had an issue on the trees, and they're way overgrown now, I was told, and so wasn't Diane, well, they were done with it. No, they weren't. Just like the gutters, they were done. This is during COVID, we're home, they weren't done. And when the manager comes out, he's like, oh, that's why my guys were home early today, because they didn't do the whole road on Greenland. So I'm concerned about the money. They're not big budgets, they're not big dollars, but they add up. And the fact that if there's no bidding on something that's $5,000 or whatever, $10,000, I'm concerned about that. Especially where it's coming out of the reserve.
That's a great question. That's part
Jacob,
of our.
Yeah, Jacob, do you want me to give a quick response to that too?
Feel free to.
So it's a really good question. So contractually, Grand Manners is required for anything over $5,000 to get 3 competitive bids.
10,000.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
10,000.
Is it? Oh, excuse me, 10,000. So if we are seeing that is not, I'm confusing operating fund, pardon me, 10,000. If there's anything that you're seeing where you believe there are not 3 competitive bids or a best effort, sometimes what ends up happening is you may put it out and, a vendor may just not be available or the market may be thin. If there's not a best effort and or 3 or more bids, then that needs to be brought to the attention of management and the board. Because they're contractually required to do that. There is a competitive bidding provision in the contract.
Charles, I know
I'll
that.
speak to some other bid questions. So if it's an operating expenditure and it's under $5,000, that's usually within management's discretion. But if we get a bid back that looks like it's high or it's not within reason, we do go out and get additional bids. When it comes to, like Charles said, anything over $10,000 or above requires a good faith effort to get 3 bids. Usually Rose has been able to get 3 bids on the larger projects that are over $10,000. We've struggled with landscape bidding for the contract work and getting 3 bids. I'll be honest with you, even after going out to 10 and 12 different companies inviting us to bid. So that has been a difficulty. Bids between $5,000 and $10,000 that are coming out of the reserves. We try to get multiple bids, at least to do a price check to make sure we're getting a good price and good work quality. And again, bids under $5,000, unless it's coming back looking like it's not in line with what we know is standard for that kind of work, then we usually take the first bid that we get with our go-to contractors.
And we do have lots or rates on planning placement as well within most of our landscaping contracts. So the numbers aren't fluctuated based on market. If it's sod, you're wanting to have, maybe a service area needs a very small amount of sod, or it's something that is a large amount of sod. We have locked rates on those, whether it's small or large, year after year. It's what price it is in our contract.
Yeah, and that's sort of like Brian mentioned at the last meeting, that you get some mulch for $9 a bag, and I'm like, I get it at Home Depot for $4.
Other products like that, they're larger, we do source them.
400 bags.
30 years here in Celebration, I have seen in the beginning, we had a beautiful town, well cared for, landscaping wise and everything. In the last 3 or 4 years, it is the worst I have ever seen, and it's getting worse by the day. I can appreciate the problems people have with landscape, but here in my mind has always been the problem with contractors. They know very well they could put in the lowest bid possible and get the job, and tell you whatever you want to hear and get the job. And then they could back off, do a crappy job because they know they will not be held accountable. As an example, last year, we've replaced our sod in Savannah Square now 2 or 3 times. And right now, 1 year ago, I, at my own expense, went out, dug up my whole freaking front yard, got all the weeds, debris out. I went down, bought brand new sod, put it down. If you look at my house today, it is all dirt. If you look at all my neighbors, it's mostly dirt. There is no sod. I had my own expense because the scope of service says a landscaper should take an analysis of the soil and the sod and find out what the problems are and take care of it. Get soil samples. not to my knowledge, have they ever done that. I did. I found out that yes, the pH is such that the plants will not take up the nutrition. So you fertilize it all you want, the plants still will not get the best benefit from it. Our particular sod has a problem called brown patch disease, which is common. It was common out here in this property. We can treat for bacteria type disease all you want. It's a fungus. I don't recall it ever being treated for that. And that may partly explain to it. Also, our so-called landscaper, who is supposed to be the professional, and that may be fine. I am also somewhat of a professional since I've had education in biology, I've had education in plants, and I've had an education and ran a nursery for many years. I know when your sod needs to be replaced, you don't simply go out and take a weed whacker, cut it down to the dirt, and you just throw the existing sod on top of it. Our guy does that. Now, we have a scope of service. Lauren, I believe, sent it to all of us to look at and sign, which we did. The scope of service is excellent. It has always been excellent in Celebration. That's not the problem. The problem is landscapers and painters and everybody else are not held to that scope. If they don't follow it, no consequences. That scope of service also has in the scope what management is supposed to do in terms of inspection, oversee, and whatever. I don't believe, my experience is that is followed. Now, in the beginning of Celebration, we had people who, like Rose and so forth, they work in the office, they do the bids, they do the contracting. But they also had on staff people who were expertise in building, contracting, landscaping on the payroll to oversee these things. Perhaps that's why we had better control back then. Right now, I don't know whether we're understaffed or undertrained or what, but we have a good contract, but we have no enforcement.
Thank you for sharing. I can say I know yours in particular, I was in discussion with your landscaper this week about your sod. There is, it is the list, has not been forgotten. Managing for the
Is that a good?
Same on Blue Sage.
on the additional items you mentioned, which are staffing. I cannot speak on what things that happened in the past. I can what they're doing to be better. I know that our staffing from our facilities team, that it's been something that we've changed in our organization very frequent months. And we have another person coming on staff to assist with exactly what you just mentioned, to help make sure that when we implement projects, that we're getting exactly what is inside of the project paths. That whenever we have installations happening, that we have our eyes on the projects as well. I apologize that hasn't happened in the past, but that's what we're looking for moving forward.
So again, that will take care of overseeing that the scope of service is in fact followed.
More questions related to the reserve study? I want to make sure, the only reason I want to keep close is we have more on this, and I want to make sure we have time at the end for open comments.
You mentioned, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the reserve studies walk, or the reserve analysts walk around the communities and help decide, this is what the reserve needs to be going forward. Is that just to maintain status quo? Like, if we want improvements, how do we get that in? How do we, landscaping, I know I don't want to go back to landscaping, but obviously landscaping needs better maintenance on a regular basis. It doesn't make any sense to replace everything, which is going to die. Right, that's it. But it is, but we need more landscaping, new landscaping. I'm a proponent of metal roofs. I might get a lot of groans in here about that, but it'd be the last roof anybody ever had. And the Parkview issues that we had, last roofing was bad. It would be the last roof everybody needed, right? It's not going to lower anybody's insurance rate. It'll be the last roof. Things like that about how can we get that addressed so it can be addressed in a reserve study if we decided we wanted to go down that road.
Yeah. So the reserve studies are done as an advisory typically as well. That's why you'll see the term, recommendations. I know, Park is a great example of, there's a small amount of funds annually for landscaping, but often because of other items, they're not available, or they get used up by one project and it never ends up solving your larger issues. That can be, there can be options that the community itself and say, we want to increase that funding for this specific project. That can be noted and be acted upon, even if it's not in that 30-year plan and our next setting up for 3 years out. If it's a no, we want to change it, so next year we do this, that can be us.
So we could, if we decided as a community and we wanted to do something different, we can adjust, have the reserve adjusted next year, even though it's a 3-year study.
So if you're looking at, so the reserve study is really looking at replacing like for like, this door for a very similar door in 3 years or 5 years. If you're talking about enhancements or improvements, like changing roofs from your current roofs to a metal roof, that's gonna be more of a capital improvement. So for that, you would need to budget either additionally in your operating account, or we would need to start almost a capital fund and making a contribution to a capital fund for improvements for your service area moving forward.
And how does that get added then when the next reserve study, 3 years, but you've got a plan to make this change? How does that tie into the reserve study that then goes forward?
So every time the reserve study company comes out, they sit with us, talk about what projects have been done in the last 3 years, what are plans moving forward for specific large expenditures for each area, not just CROA, but each of the service areas. So if you were planning on installing metal roofs in 5 years, and reserve advisors is gonna be out here in 3 years to do another reserve study, you can say, look, you know, we're gonna need to modify our reserve funding because this is the plan. In 2 more years, we're gonna sell metal roofs in Parkview, so we can, you know, reduce the funding when it comes to roof replacement, because we're gonna have metal roofs instead of the standard roofs that are.
That makes sense.
So it's just conversations with the company.
We do this in larger scale with the Scroll Master account as well. If it's, you know, we want to see more, the town has an initiative to make our parks better. We need more than what our reserve was allotting on a yearly basis. So on the new plan, that allotment has been increased. That does, you know, it can change the contributions to it. It can change the contributions, but it also helps us be able to do what we want to do with the reserves. It's based off of recommendations for that specific community.
So the reserve study, I'm sorry, one more question. You know, when you're walking around and you're looking at the community and there's plants missing, there's dead things. I mean, I don't want to say they need to be replaced. And that's not going to be included in the reserve of, hey, we need to up the reserve a little bit more because we know we have work to do here.
That is the right mindset. That is what typically we can do or would like to do. Because there is that small budget for the landscaping non-contract out of your operating fund that can be used for those types of items. Unfortunately, it typically gets used up very quick by, you know, irrigation repairs, like we said, storm and unexpected issues that eat that entire budget. And then, or other expenditures eat the reserves, and that's why landscaping is often the first item to not try to, or to get that reserve anticipated year in to what it should be. Often you see as service area, the landscaping gets the boost because it's not the roof, it's not the paint.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, and then we'll go.
Can a reserve study account or take into consideration maybe extra employees to ensure quality control? Because just as an example, bad example, landscaping. We had sod put down, broken irrigation system, we called it in, nothing happened, the sod died. So I feel like if there was someone that was following around each project as it was occurring and doing quality control, then maybe, you know, and I don't know if that would come out of your reserve
No,
or.
that shouldn't have the reserve, that should be out of what you pay into the contracts, and that's what we are working to do moving forward. And you're gonna see that we do have staff.
But you can't do everything, three of them,
No.
four.
Yes, and that's why we're not just making any promises. I'm saying, oh, no, we're gonna have Rose investigate every time what sod is laid and follow up because it's like, we have to be sensible and realistic. So you have to follow through with what we're saying. That's why we're looking at leveraging inside our facilities team, We have a facility supervisor position we kept, or we have open for a fair amount of months to make sure we get the right person in that can do what we're wanting to do. That their main role is not an in-office job. It is out inside all of our property, out in the field. Most of their day, that role works with our maintenance technicians, helping assign and taking care of making sure that we're getting the maximum output and efficiencies from our maintenance team, as well as being the eyes and ears for our service area department on projects involving the exterior of the service areas.
Because I won't that prevent dipping into the reserve fund for dead landscaping or bad paint jobs, or bad roofing. If you have somebody, it's spending money instead of paying twice.
So I feel positive that we
Jacob.
are one of that.
Charles, comment.
Charles?
Yeah, it's really a good discussion that I'm hearing, and I want to add a little more color. So in the last board meeting, there was a discussion about adding staffing, and I think from where I sit, and I'm going to speak for others on the board as well. Throwing staffing at the problem is really the last resort, because we're really trying to do this looking at processes, number one, and really under the current staffing model, and to be very candid, under the Grand Manor's contract. So this is really something that Grand Manor's is tasked to do. And so this is not something that, is above and beyond. This is really kind of just the basics of running the association. So the really kind of the first line of defense is looking at the processes, getting better controls in place, having better project oversight, because the last thing we really want to do, the last thing I certainly want to do, is pass on more staffing costs to the homeowners. What we're talking about here is really identified in an area that we can control, just with better processes and better oversight. So that's just my 2 cents from a board perspective.
Thanks, Charles. And I think 2 more regarding reserves and then continue on.
Question regarding the reserve funding studies, do we have documents or charters that require that to be outsourced? Or can it be done in-house? And if it requires to be done outsourced, how much are we paying reserve advisors to do that?
So we are required to do a reserve study.
In-house, or does it have to be outsourced?
So you would not want to do this in-house. They are leveraging engineers, architects, professionals in those fields to come up with these numbers, do the projection, make an assessment as to the remaining useful lives of these.
They're doing the inspections.
They're doing the inspections, making recommendations. So we are really relying on their expertise and in their many, many years of doing these studies, not only in this association, but in other associations. So doing that in-house would not be advisable. I don't know the exact number that we're paying them off the top of my head, but you do get some economy of scale because CROA, Canoa, CJC, and all of these service areas use the same company, and they come out here at one time to do all of them at the same time. So you are getting some economy of scale there.
And the Crows is exponentially larger as well. It has a lot, every park has items in it that they review in every park of the 80 different parks. I know you have your hand.
When these contracts are created for the vendors to do landscape and whatever, who draws up the contract?
So you have a standard services agreement that CROA uses as a baseline. It's that plus the scope of work that is issued for, if it's an RFP for landscaping services or for the paint job or roofing. That is attached as an exhibit to the contract. The payment schedule as proposed in the bid, as long as it's in line with CROA's expectations. But that all goes to CROA's legal counsel for final review and sign off before anything is approved.
Because the contracts should definitely address quality control. And the vendors that we're using at this point in time are not following up on their own work. They're laying the sod down, they're not checking if the irrigation system is working. In fact, the communication between different individuals working for the association don't even talk to each other. Last year, someone shut off the water to South Village because there was a problem with the pipe, but nobody knew about it for almost 2 months. In the meantime, we're putting sod down. Sod is dying. There has to be either quality control in the contract with the individual vendor that they have to either check their work. And if they don't check their work, there's some type of penalty that they have to pay. And there also has to be something in the legal review of the contract that says that quality control is definitely going to occur. And if it doesn't, there's going to be penalties associated with that. Because nobody is watching what the left hand and right hand is doing at this point in time. And your contracts are the only way to be able to control that process, because that's where it's going to hurt or sting the vendor, because they're going to get penalized if it doesn't meet the expectations.
Was that water shut off by CD water shut off?
I was just gonna say, that is one, all we can say, we have people, Rose looking at these contracts. That's also been a large thing, our facility director that we hired is reviewing the contracts and also helping us as our team when it comes to these conversations with our vendors on upholding these agreements and contracts. I'm seeing this multiple times a week and different things, new projects we're doing. Our facility director is taking the contracts to the vendors, having this really hard conversation saying, it's here. Do it, it's here. It has to be done according to the paper. Irrigation is a very hot subject that we, our management team have been pressing on our vendors as well, as we want to see Washington better maintenance and oversight of our irrigation in our parks and in our service areas, because that is a large, dependability on all of the landscape. Is checking on that. That's now part of all of our effects as well, and that we're following up with our vendors on these irrigation inspections. That I can't see, that's something that we're working more than we have in the past on making sure that these irrigation is being inspected on.
And when one more point here. You say that you put mulch down twice a year. Okay, and maybe you do, I don't know. We've only owned across the street for not quite 2 years yet. But the problem with that, putting mulch down on top of mulch on top of mulch and never cleaning out there ends up killing the plants because of the fungus that builds up with all the mulch that's building up around the plants. So then we get into the situation where now we have to replace the plants because they're dying, or the azaleas or whatever are dying because they're being treated and aren't being treated with, because we don't clean out. So who's stepping outside the box to think about that? Because we can't be putting mulch down twice a year and never removing mulch because it doesn't decay faster. So that's a simple issue. But who's going to address that?
That's something that we can start looking at before. I've done this with kids before. It does often increase that, or to change the scope inside of the mulch or the installer to install removable. It's something that can be reviewed service area by service area to see if that additional cost is something that the service area wants to look at as part of the scope.
You don't feel that should be part of the original bid?
It can be, and that's to make sure that the
Different scope of service.
That's where
Can I ask, to all their points, landscaping clearly is an issue for all of us, but that's our curb appeal. You talk about landscaping, that's my curb appeal. The neighbor puts his house up for sale, my house impacts that, and my landscaping looks like crap. Then his house has value change it. Contracts, quality control, huge deal. I can't count how many times the landscapers come through my yard, make it look pristine, then go to the neighbor's yard, walk off, and my yard looks like crap because he blew everything across the fence. There's no quality control. Mulch is a huge deal. At least you're getting it. I've been in there 4 years. It's happened one time. Somehow it's a reserve item, but it's a project that never gets done. So
Mulch is not,
you want
mulch
to,
is not a reserve item.
but it's not a landscape item either.
The landscaping
Landscaping, not a contract.
Never gotten done. In 4 years that I've lived here, it's happened once.
Okay, so let's,
Yeah, we're gonna,
So
we've heard the comments on the
To my
landscaping and
point.
quality control, and they are definitely, I think we'll see later in the presentation that we, even before this evening, that we knew that they were issues and needed to be addressed in terms of improving processes moving forward. But let's let Jacob finish the presentation unless anybody else has a question specifically on the reserve fund.
Can I just throw in the CDC or CCD and irrigation?
because that is part of the issue. You know, is making sure, because they're the ones that screw up the irrigation when they're doing sidewalk repair and don't do anything about it. So I guess better communication, I don't know how you
We have
communicate.
been
with them.
working diligently with CDDP to improve relationship with them and communications with them. That has been one of our priorities, especially when it comes to projects.
Perfect.
So let's keep moving with the presentation.
Yeah, try to speak to through these so we can get more on the discussion based off the comments and things tonight as well. As we explain, so effectively, it's not pertaining to the service area, these are triaged to the correct department. Going through this just on a quicker basis, sidewalks are typically a responsibility of CCD, I have been making here. As far as bulk pickup or recycling, that's celebration sanitation responsibility. How do I report a light post outage if not a CCD area, and contact Duke to provide the serial number of the light post? Who is responsible for trimming tree branches in my backyard from the conservation area or CCD? CCD will not enter the homeowner's property, therefore the homeowner is responsible for trimming those if it's the nature reserve falling in. And who do you call about water utilities, and that is the ECD. We're
Quick
gonna.
question.
Yeah.
The lights on the bridge to Island Village,
CDD.
CDD,
Mhm.
do you have any idea when they're gonna be fixed? It's for the moment.
My recommendation whenever it comes to specific items like that is to use the My Celebration app, the GoDot, that we all use. What's helpful with that is like the ticketing system, but they should have to close out and or in respond to you whenever that item is closed out. So if anything, you're kind of unsure, submit it through the My Celebration app. What's great about that app is we also share that with them. So whether that is a service area related individual item, or it is a celebration program item, or a CCDD item, we all look at that app. And if it's none of them at all, then at least you're gonna get a direct response inside. Typically, answering those. Service area committees, you had some discussions on why some, about this, so directed this very quick, it's a little bit. So this is over the charter and the code of conduct. We have eight of our service areas currently with committees, and we had some, recent attempt. We had one, passed through by votes, and one that did not have enough support for that. Every year, there is a service area committee charter resolution. The 2025 service area committee charter resolution will be, take place once the new board has staffed after the annual meeting. And quick overview of what is in the service area charter resolution. We have the universal committee goals. This is to represent the owners, to reflect the townhomes, elect by relative townhouse service area members for a term of 1 year. Make recommendations to management and to the Borough Board and abide by the consulting body of conduct. The service area committee goals and objectives are 1, to represent and act on behalf of the owners with respect to the services and benefits that the association provides to the service areas in accordance to the service area bylaws. 2, the service area committee may determine the nature of extent of services, if any, to be provided to the service area by the association in addition to those provided to all in accordance with the charter and the service area supplemental agreement. And 3, the service area committee may advise the board and management on issues, but shall not have the authority to bind the board. So I always like to say the service areas are there to help, the committees are there to help you resource inside of your service area. If you have a committee, your service area has an email account that is, that you can email, it sends to all of them. And that as well to help you kind of stay in the loop on your question and getting those escalated on a larger platform.
How do we find out who's on each committee, or each area?
On those, an announcement usually goes out once those are appointed by the board, once the new board happens. If you don't know who your service area is or you're needing that contact, send an email to the, just to our general email. That'll have the,
They don't have this rose one. She is also on the website.
yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, it's on the website. Or if you, anything, if you need those types of contacts or have those questions, email us at town hall so we can get those answers to you.
We've also implemented service areas and email collectives, so you can email your service area collective if you have one. And that email collective, it goes to your committee members so they can see it and engage in any discussions with Rose and Elise if they need to.
And this is Charles. Sorry, I had to dial back in. I'm also on those collectives now. So from a board perspective, I'm seeing some of those that come across as well and paying attention just to make sure that the board is engaged on topics as appropriate. But feel free at any point in time to please bring anything to the board, to myself or the full board.
Thanks, Charles. Oh, thank you, Rose. The last, regarding the charter resolution, just to read through that quickly, the service area committee's authority would be limited to oversight of maintenance provided to assure that it is in line with community-wide standard to organize suggestions and requests to management regarding the level of services being provided, to make recommendations to the owners regarding the level of service being provided and whether additional services may be of interest and benefit to the homeowners within the service area. And general oversight of the extent of quality of the services being provided by the association and the level of assessment being incurred by the homeowners within the service area. 5, the service area committee shall consist of 3 to 5 members as appointed by the Borough Board of Directors. And 6 and final, the service area committee members shall be appointed for a term of 1 year or until their successors are appointed. Any director elected to the Board of Directors from the service area shall be an ex officio member of the service committee. When you are on a service area committee, you abide by the committee member code of conduct. This is the same code of conduct for our board and all committees inside of Pro and Celebration as well. The main thing why we like to share this is there's some things that maybe you would like your committee to do, but that they are kind of binded by the code of conduct, what they can enter into and what they cannot. Some of the main items on this are soliciting personal business or gain while acting in the capacity of a member of the consulting body or as a board volunteer, communicating directly with any vendor, person, or entity of the board requested to submit a bid to provide services to the board, or one currently providing services to the board without express written case by case approval basis due to from the board. Failing to disclose any personal or business relationship, accepting anything of value from an individual, group, organization, or constituent. The final part of the presentation before I move on is this is the process improvements for 2025. So when I said we're doing some changes, this is where these changes come into place. Some of these items in the process improvements are taking some practices that we currently have and putting them in a different form that we can hold more accountable by. And other items of this in particular are in late 2023, early 2024, as town hall as a whole, we went through a large process improvement and consulting with the Crow board on it. And this is the kind of the final phase of aligning that process improvement into the service areas department. Some items inside this process improvement are the main one of difference is going to be this section 1, which is to have the committee meetings kind of treated more as a 720 association. That's a typical homeowners Florida Statute 720 owners association. This is going to involve making sure that the idea on this is that if the committees are meeting to help the service area understand what's happening in those committee meetings on behalf. And so some of these items would include letting the community know about those meetings within 48 hours of the meeting to be open to the community, the service area community with in-person and virtual options available, having these recorded for records and posted on our website, meeting minutes being taken and approved by the committee, and each meeting containing an overview of financials, overview of landscaping, overview of any bids, overview of any current projects and upcoming projects, and any additional topics requested by the committee. This is part of that accountability that we're trying to align in every one of the 14 different service areas and aligning it with the larger town hall as well. The additional items in this are more representative of the current work taking place inside of our service area team, but with a bit more of a structure based on it, with a specific intention not to add more work just for work's sake. This is, each service area should receive their monthly report from management. The report will include an overview of the financials, landscaping, bids, the current projects, upcoming projects, and additional items. Landscape inspections taking place on a monthly basis and documented with, that's something that we're doing currently, but as well as just putting in a much more of a aligned process. 4 community standards inspections taking place on a monthly basis and documenting the pictures and with written report. The report should be identified of any areas of potential concerns. These are typically then consulted with our community standards manager and department. That in before moving forward on those types of action items. 5, communication with the resident should be professional and solution oriented. 6, service requests from a community member or committee member should be documented as a task or project in Syria. And 7, and final, the project's communication of the process and anticipated timeline to be sent out to the committee and community. For example, with a spring power washing, committee/community should be notified that the RFP, the request for proposal, will be issued on X date with the response of the bids back on Y date. Committee review of the response by bids on Z date, and the expected board approval on A date. The communication should also include any anticipated start date for the commencement of the power washing. As well as the last bullet point, inspections of the work should be documented in a log. And any items are identified as not meeting the scope of work, the vendor should be updated and corrective action should be taken. Again, these are items based off of the feedback we've had. This is items that we've started in a discussion workshop with the Crow Board. We said, we want to take it to this forum as well. After this happening and getting feedback from those service areas that have committee and their committees in addition. Before it goes back to the board, they want to be able to make sure they received and get proper feedback on it before implementing this process improvement. The idea behind this is to help align in a lot of the areas of pain points and concerns from the service areas that we can address these in a much more unified and standardized process.
Question. As far as.
Jacob, can I jump in?
Charles,
So sorry. So there were a couple of themes that I heard in talking with residents and committees, and hopefully you're seeing this infused through some of these improvements. And number one was project oversight, and I heard that from a few residents in the audience, and that's really inexcusable. So that's an area where we have to improve today, period. So when a project is initiated, we need to make sure that when we're executing that, we make sure that we are holding the vendor accountable. We're going out there, we're visiting the site, ensuring I heard the quality. Quality is key, but we're making sure that we're actually getting out there and getting eyes on the projects. That's really, really, really important. Project oversight has to happen and has to get better immediately. And then communication, I know, was another one that, as I was talking with the management team, is something, you know, we that's inexcusable too. And there's a lot going on, obviously, with 14 service areas, but we have to be in contact with residents. We may not have all the answers right away, but knowing that it's going to be researched and looked into, just acknowledging the issue is key, and giving a turnaround time. So hopefully, you know, the one thing I would also add here is, I said this in the last board meeting, we need to be able to execute these. So if this is a list of items that we're going to come back from a board perspective next month and say, well, we did 2 of these, but not the other 20, we're going to have a larger problem. So the expectation here is that everything that they have presented on this improvement plan are actionable and executable. And if they're not, then that's a separate conversation. But know that the board is looking at this and you have our full support on this as well.
Projects oversight is one that that has been in our strategy conversations, and that I feel more confident than before that we're going to be able to act on this based on assistance from our facilities experts.
So, and then please know that these process improvement changes aren't going to go into effect instantly all over the place. So after tonight, we will share this document on the Celebration website, on the service area page of the website. So you and your fellow residents from the service areas can look at it and kind of digest it a little bit more, since this was kind of put out there really quickly this evening. So we want your feedback on any other topics that you think need to be added, anything changed, or anything that you don't like in the process improvement plan. We will then take that feedback. We will look at it, and we will have continued conversations with the Pro Board, and we will propose a rollout plan. It will probably be about a 6-month rollout plan to get all of these up and running and going smoothly. But we are committed to improving the service in the service areas and making sure the vendors are held accountable. And I know landscaping has been a top priority, not just in the service areas, but in Celebration as a whole as well. So that is one of our top priorities too.
Just a quick question. The items in the beginning, such as meetings notice to the community, et cetera, would that be applicable just to the quarterly meetings, or say we have an in-between meeting?
So that's something that we need to discuss with each service area. I think some service areas warrant more than one quarterly meeting just because of the scale of projects and the work that needs to be done in those service areas. For other service areas, maybe Island Village, you guys are newer. You don't have as many projects going on out there, so maybe a quarterly meeting is more applicable.
So that these guidelines would just apply towards a formal quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
We're not saying, let's get things in between and just have a
Clarification. Those guidelines on the first action item in the process improvement regarding the 720 association ruling is more of a formalized meetings. And that's just so we can have those opportunities for committees to be with the community in the same room with management.
Oh, yes.
I have a process question. Being a former single-family homeowner, where I was beholden to ARC, especially when we sold our property and moved to the townhome, who oversees, because we were told when we asked some questions that ARC does not deal with any of the HOA issues. They just deal with the homeowner issues, and that came from town hall. So who oversees our areas? Who makes them accountable?
So
Like ARC does to the single family homeowner.
yes, so if we're doing a repainting project on the townhomes, we submit an ARC application on the townhome community's behalf. Same with roofing projects. If we're doing a large landscaping revamp, that should go through ARC as well. If we're drastically changing the landscaping, that's Rose and Delise that are working on that. But when it comes to community standards, like inspections of the homes, like you need to paint your mailbox, you need to look at the carriage lights. Our community standards teams work hand in hand with Rose and Delise. I will say that's become more of a focal point. Not that they're trying to target townhomes, but they haven't been looked at and inspected thoroughly in many years. And that predates even GM. So they are on, we just rolled out SmartWebs for community standards inspections. The townhomes are in SmartWebs and they will start getting their quarterly inspections.
Yeah, because there is work done on our property that if it was our single family home, we would have been dinged and had a letter immediately. And that has a lot to do with the follow-up component.
Yes.
Because it was never followed up on and it was substandard.
Yes, I have a bit of a concern or issue with this 720. I don't think a service area committee really constitutes a 720. But if it's going to be treated like a 720, we need to have access. Like, for example, we have 20 people in Green, 20 different townhomes. I have no way to contact them except to go through Rose and come back around. You know, I can knock on their door, but a lot of them are renters. Yeah, it's really not possible without information.
So I will tell you, the Crowell Board of Directors did not have access to everybody's contact information either.
Okay.
They do not have
We
emails.
run the 720 meeting, which requires us notifying the administration.
Management is doing the notification, not the committees. All of these processes that are being laid out are management processes that we are handling the communication
Okay, so
for.
then we have enough to do, they can handle communication among neighbors.
So it will be.
I'm just checking.
We will be noticed. I mean, if you want to talk to your fellow neighbors about
I
community,
can't. That's what you're talking about.
it's the same way we do it with the Crowell Board of Directors. Management's the one notifying the entire
It's
community.
working. It's not working.
Yeah, it was a challenge to just get enough people voting.
So, yeah,
That's a resident-run process, and we can facilitate that, but we cannot be reaching out to residents and encouraging them to vote one way or the other.
Charles?
If they want to.
yeah. Yeah, can I add real quick? Part of the reason for doing this through management is also access to records. So in order to be considered public disclosure, my understanding is it has to be, there has to be a manager. Basically, the management company has to be a party to those emails. So if you just send those from one service area to residents, there really is no, my understanding at least, is there's no right to then inspect those. So that also is an issue that is contemplated under having management kind of be the liaison for those emails and for the communications. Among other things, that's really their job, is to handle those communications. But it would also not give the ability to have those records available for copying.
Thank you, finally. I have a whole host of questions, but I'm just going to ask a very simple one right now. How often do the service area committees meet?
Formally, quarterly.
The monthly procedure is gone by the wayside?
Some of them meet monthly, but informally, they do a walk with Rose to look at the community, but it's not a formal meeting.
Okay, let me say, as a founding member of service area committees, before your time and Rose's time, et cetera, used to meet monthly. We were always informed. Notices went out. There was no question in anyone's mind when there was a meeting. I don't remember the last meeting for Spring Lake. That's pathetic.
That's what the first step in the process improvement is to help resolve.
Well, there's a hell of a lot that needs resolved in Celebration, in addition to meetings. I agree with everything that these people have said. This gentleman up front in the orange shirt deserves an award for his presentation as far as the landscaping situation. This gentleman wants to know where he can find the scope and sequence for Explicit's work in Spring Lake. Go to their contract, and it is very, very explicit in plain, simple English on what the scope and sequence is for landscaping. I will add that it's never, ever been met. Never been met.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I've been in Spring Lake for 7 years. And so I moved in when it was 2.5 years old. I was a director of facilities for a global financial institution for 30 years. And the Malaysian mediocrity that has transpired in the last 7 years in the Spring Lake community, I would qualify as horrific and would never have been accepted in my employment experience. My big problem is the differentiation of, because the townhome scope and the garden scope, it's very difficult for me to figure out who belongs to what. To know where should I focus. For example, the townhomes were painted roughly 2 years ago. There's the articulating boom lift that was used during the project, rubbed along the wall that runs along Celebration Boulevard. There's damage to the stucco and big black marks in the tire that rubbed up against the wall. Has never been addressed. So nobody obviously inspected the work that was done because the black marks are still on the wall and the stucco is still damaged. This destruction to the irrigation system is abhorrent. I walked the property since I retired in April. I walked the property 2 or 3 times a day. And I would be happy if you gave me 100 pink flags. I'll go stake out everything that I can find. Give me a site plan and I'll stake the whole place. But there's only 2 people that do irrigation repairs in this entire complex. I talked to one of them today. There is no way they can keep up with the volume of work that's across this property with 2 people. I pointed stuff out to them. They were out fixing things. There have been pine trees in the northeast corner of Spring Lake that the stumps are still there for 6 years. And the irrigation is completely destroyed. They came out, I guess maybe in advance of this meeting, came out last week and capped certain of them. But the gaps are still there. So there's no reason, I don't know how anybody could have expectation of the survival of the landscape if the irrigation system isn't working. The irrigation parts are in every plant bed that you look at. They're not hard to find if somebody is looking for them, but with only 2 people, they're only going to be able to do reactive calls. They're never going to be proactive about managing the property. And if we don't fix the irrigation, there's no point. There's 30, 40, 50-foot gaps in the landscaping across Celebration Boulevard along the town that have been in the last 6 or 7 years have radically deteriorated. And I hear through the grapevine that they're waiting for a bulk pricing to come and do the replacement, which never happens. The other, and maybe I'll just send a question in about the differentiation of scope. One of my questions tonight was, who, if anybody, owns the relationship with commercial properties on Celebration Boulevard?
So Canoa, all the commercial properties on the boulevard and in Celebration are also managed by Town Hall. If it's related to covenants inspections, they get quarterly covenants inspections. We have actually fined a couple of businesses this year because of the appearance of the properties. So if there's other concerns about the commercial.
Well, that's as much as the blight of the community, right? Those properties that run between, the one basically between 7-Eleven and the U-Haul and the northernmost property. Yeah, the empty properties are horrific, right? So a couple of years ago, went out and took my own zip ties and replaced the green sheeting to the fence that had constantly blows apart. Well, now after the 2 storms, there's nothing left of them, orange shreds. There's 4 barrels of hydraulic fluid that are on, now that the green screen is gone, you can see 4 barrels of hydraulic fluid. Are we waiting for that to deteriorate to cause a hazardous condition on our property that we're going to have to spend money to repair? Or is somebody going to take a look at this and deal with these property owners in managing their property?
The owner of that property did receive a citation for those items.
Are they going to replace the screening? I mean, you don't have to answer that now, Lauren, but that is much of, as the gentleman started initially, that is much of the curb appeal of our properties at each of the individual homes. When somebody drives in, do I really want to live here?
We completely agree with some. We do have an inspector at Town Hall that is mainly focused on town properties. As those have not been receiving inspections and celebration for many, many years, even prior to at the level of detail that they are getting now.
Okay.
And I can tell you that some of them have been fined and some of them have gone to the Canoa attorney for collecting.
As long as there's a, you know, a mechanism by which you can get resolution, so that it doesn't just go on in perpetuity.
It's something with homeowners, we can find, if they don't find and they don't correct, then we can send the collections and say with the collections, and we can file a lien if they don't respond. And then we'll go through the legal process. It's not a quick process by any
I'm
means.
sure there's steps you have to take, but.
Do you still have a comment?
I can say. So with regard to, I'm not standing here. Just to give you an idea of feelings from town hall, many years ago, not, I mean, I haven't been here that long, I was told that my standards are too high.
That's what I was told, sorry to back me up.
And I complained about the landscaping. And I said, I'm paying every month. It's like taking the money and just throwing it to the breeze. Because not a damn thing gets done. It doesn't get resolved. Whatever you talk about, it's talking on deaf ears. And more than once, well, you know, their standards are too high. And if any of you know me or know my house, you're probably going to turn around and say, what the hell are you talking about? Because your place looked pretty good. It looked pretty good for a good period of time because I was paying my own landscaper in addition to paying you folks. So it was costing me more than double to make my property look halfway decent. And I get compliments, hey, Joe, your place looks really nice. Thank you. No thanks to whomever, Yellowstone, Benchmark, Exquisite, etc. And when we talk about contracts, I was involved with all of the contracts. I interviewed all of the landscapers. The committee did. I never missed a meeting. The bids were opened and no selection had been made, and we had not given a recommendation to the PROA board. One member of the committee who no longer lives in Celebration says, hey, I know somebody that has a landscaping company. Hey, pal, it's too late. The bids have been opened. And if you've ever been involved in bidding, you pull that stunt, you're going to be sitting before a judge. Sure enough, they give him a call. He comes in, puts a bid in. Guess who it was? Brian Causey from Exquisite. His bid was $10. I'm losing my voice here. $10 below the lowest bid. I go to the service area person and I said, let me ask you a question. Did you tell him what the lowest bid was? Oh, no, I would never do that. I says, well, it sure as hell looks like you did. Because how does this guy come in $10 lower than the worst company we had, Yellowstone?
So thank you for your comment. What I can say is I can't speak on our name in the past. I can speak.
I'm giving you history that you don't have and you don't have.
Sir, we will invite you to come meet with us in person so we can give other residents an opportunity to have comment in this time period.
That's my story.
Thank you.
We'll take one more from the audience.
I've lived in Celebration for over 15 years in a single family home. And we are ready to start taking care of our lawn ourselves because it looks, and our sidewalks because they look horrendous. But I was told that once I say that we're gonna go ahead and start doing it ourselves, that it's for as long as we live there, that's how long we have to do that. What I want to know is if there's somebody else hired, another landscaper hired that we want to try out, we would gladly try them out to see what kind of work they do. But we're not happy with what's going on now.
Which service area?
We're in Greenlawn. So
I know that went out to bid for new landscaping services.
that was our request from our committee.
Yeah. So,
It's going to the board workshop.
okay, yeah.
I also will tell you that you don't have to accept the lowest bid.
Correct. Yeah.
Academy Row chose a landscaper that was more money than Exquisite and decided to go with them because they were assured of better quality.
That's true.
So you don't have to take what's given to you.
And just because they say they're, because they say they're going to do something, doesn't mean.
Yeah, closing remarks, I want to thank you all for coming to this meeting. If there's things that we didn't get to, please feel free to let us know, email those to us. I know, I can't speak to what may have happened in the past. I know that my role every day I come into this, into work, is to make a difference in our community.
If what happens in the past bears on the present, it needs to be addressed. That's not an excuse.
That's what I'm here.
And I appreciate, I've been raising my hand 3 or 4 times. You look me right in the eyes and have not allowed me to speak. But I know, and that's fine.
Sorry.
We've got a service area, meeting here. The service area manager hasn't even stepped up here and talked to us about it.
We've decided to do that.
Thanks
Thanks very much.
It's important to hear from Rose. It's important to hear from management because management is doing the operational part of this whole process we're talking about. So management should be up here speaking to. And if we only have 8 service committees out of 14, where are the other 6? And are we allowed to have more service committee members to the committee? Right now, there's only 3 for South Village. We have 6.
You can have 5. You can have 5.
3 to 5.
Then why don't we have 5? There's a lot of people here that have concerns and expertise in different areas that
Invite them every.
contribute to the committee.
Specifically, just barely got enough volunteers to maintain your committee this year. So every year there's a call for candidates in March for service area committee members. So if you're interested in being on your service area committee, please look for that call for candidates in the Monday Matters and in blast to your communities from Sierra Net. Also, if your community does not have a service area committee, please reach out to Rose and she can explain the process to you for going through that. In case a community doesn't conform threshold and a majority. We did recently have one community that tried and was not successful.
So how many people in Roseville Corner were notified that there was going to be a vote on that? When we talked about communications, how do we know that?
They were all notified via e-blast and there was a mailer. Yes, via mail too.
Email.
There was an email and then.
No, but you said Rowan does not have information.
Management has that information. I'm saying the pro board of directors is not have access to that information, so they can. Pleasuring it. We can't, yes.
Rosy, cayeron duro eh.